Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As we welcome you once again to the airwaves of Salam Media on this Wednesday evening. It is Wednesday nights with myself, Inayat Wadi, and once again we in conversation with a number of issues that are impacting on us right across the entire world. Now, we have seen a lot being said and quite a bit being reported with regard to Hamas and the agreement to a conditional phased framework to disarm. And this has been a major talking point. And what's important to understand is the position of Hamas in unpacking and breaking down regarding what this disarmament actually means. And so also looking at the roadmap in terms of breaking it down into some of the key issues, the key demands, and also some of the strategic calculations on the part of Hamas. Now, clearly, this has raised many a question, particularly after we've learned of the martyrdom of many of the leaders and the top leaders of Hamas that were martyred during the course of the genocide. And now we have this disarmament that is demanded of Hamas. And the key question here is what lies ahead for Hamas and what is their thinking? My guest tonight, we are joined by Professor Nidal Sakr, a Palestinian activist, and also a poet, and also Dr. Ahmed Jazbhay, and he is a lecturer in political science and at UNISA, and also a researcher at Media Review Network. We are hoping also to be joined by Osama Nazzal, who is based in Jenin, and he is a journalist. So let's welcome our guests on screen right now, both Professor Nidal Sakr and Dr. Haroon Jazbhay. I see Osama Nazzal is with us on screen as well. To all three of you, Dr. Ahmed, Prof. Nidal, and Osama, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome.
Walaikum
Walaikum
assalam.
assalam wa barakatuh. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yes, Prof. Nidal, let's just start off and let's just try and get an understanding and an overview as we try and unpack the position of Hamas. And I think more importantly, just before we get there, just your thoughts on this framework for Hamas to disarm under this US brokered 20-point plan.
Brother, when we look at the scene today, we see that there are different players. Among them, there are the events, reality, and kingmaker role. And we see other roles as reactionary or trying to sabotage whatever the king or event maker is doing. So if we're looking at the scene right now and we see, like, for example, like you mentioned the US, I am in the US. I've been active in the US for much of my life. And the US actually is not really by any means the king or the event maker. The US is some parasite nation that has a very evil agenda, imperialist agenda against humanity at large. And they exploit every opportunity they have in the world scene to serve that agenda, whether it be it in Palestine, Middle East, or even all over the world. It comes in different shapes and forms, depends who is in power. And they both, even though that, let's say, Democrats and Republicans speak different language or seem to speak different language, but they're just as evil. And if you look at their record in terms of wars, in terms of chaos, in terms of serving the Zionist agenda, I think they outbid each other all the time. Neither one of them is by any means legitimate, legal, or meets any human standards. Hamas, on the other hand, as the resistance project, not only for Palestine, as we've seen, but for free people all over the world, is basically a group of people who have a statement of purpose, have a mission, a life mission, and they live to fulfill that mission. And the outcome of that mission is, as we know, is either martyrdom or victory. Both actually are considered to be, including martyrdom, as ultimate victory. It has different dimensions. It has the personal goal, who is the person who is seeking martyrdom. And we know that it is the ultimate reward in Islam, and actually in even like in any human cause. And being in the front line and the line of fire in many causes, martyrdom is not something that really you get it very easy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala picks and chooses the martyrs, so it is an ultimate reward. Only the selected people that are being chosen for it. What we see in Hamas, for example, like Hamas is the movement, is the culture, is a way of life. So it's not really an organization as they try to present it, or like some armed group as they say. It is a culture, and that culture, alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep that culture in our ummah until the day of judgment. Because it is the anchor, it is the hope for humanity to have a free world where justice prevails and human dignity is the standard. The leaders of Hamas over the years, different generations of leaders, different lines of leaders, I trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that they sincerely sought martyrdom as their ultimate goal. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually has shown us time and time again that Allah chooses his martyrs even if they are in the least likely places to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether it's be it in Hamas or be it in, for example, like the Murshid of Iran, who was 84, 85 years old, about to die of quote unquote natural causes. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as I trust in Allah, has granted him martyrdom in some of the least likely scenarios. The same thing with Ismail Haniyeh, for example. Ismail Haniyeh, supposedly he's not in Gaza, he's safe, and he's probably in one of the safer places. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose him as a martyr in the most likely scenarios, and so on and so forth. So Hamas over the years, alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, and as I trust that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted them martyrdom due to the sincerity of their intentions, one after another. You see, Hamas as movement has been always, alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, staying at the forefront of our jihad against evil. And now we are in a situation where things look different, but only from the outside. However, from behind the scene is completely actually much more assuring picture. So we see, for example, like anytime you hear the word US, I don't know who is delusioned enough to think US is a neutral party and mediator and peacekeeper and so forth. US is the enemy. As you remember when October 7th happened, from the US, I said actually that when we confront the evil, when we confront the genocide that's taking place against Palestinians, we don't go after Israel first and foremost. We go after the US as the main culprit, as the main criminal here, and Israel as accessory. And on this show, time and time again, and in my travels, when I met with activists and strategists and politicians and legal teams trying to address the genocide, I said, if you are not going after the US as the primary suspect, you're just wasting time. And you do that through US courts, first and foremost, and then international courts, because as we saw, the US, whenever they set up international organization, international umbrella that fails to serve their objective, they just scratch it out altogether. But US court system is a different way where we could have addressed this issue. So that's on one hand. As far as what's happening in Gaza right now, there is the US supposedly brokered this terrorist phase of trying to liquidate the Palestinian cause, liquidate Gaza, West Bank, and of course we see Lebanon, we see Syria, we see Iran, we see Iraq, we see and so forth. So there is no intention whatsoever to establish peace anywhere except like serve that imperialist Zionist agenda. However, on the other hand, Hamas had a purpose out of October 7. They had a goal after October 7, and that goal was stated. They wanted to expose this whole project to the entire world and to turn the entire world against it. Why? Because October 7 happened at a time when Arab countries were racing to normalize with Israel to serve the greater Israel project. So Hamas basically had no backing and needed to mobilize support worldwide and so forth. So October 7 happened. To my belief that actually Muslim response to it has been weak and mediocre in many ways. Iran, Hezbollah, and so forth, even though that they joined at some point. I think they could have joined earlier, and that would have made it even much more impactful. But nonetheless, you look today at the US, including like elections that we had on Tuesday last night. I mentioned after October 7th, I said Hamas is the one to decide the next US president. And we talk about that last election. And I said that Hamas is the kingmaker to all the future generations of US leaders. And I said that in 2028, I said actually 2024, I said is the last election where Israel is going to be on the map, the last U.S. general election for president, that Israel is going to be on the map. And I'm still, inshallah, committed to that inshallah, faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that 2028 Israel is not going to be there anymore anyway. And we see it right now, even in the 2026 upcoming midterm elections. The word Israel has become like a cancer, has become a plague. Everybody wants to stay away from it. And that's not only in the US, that's actually everywhere around the world. So inshallah, in a couple of years' time, we're going to see Hamas, inshallah, leading the state of Palestine out of Jerusalem, its capital, inshallah. And Al-Aqsa, inshallah, is going to be free. And my pledge to you that, inshallah, that Ramadan 2028 is going to be, inshallah, where we do i'tikaf in a free Palestine and a free Al-Aqsa, inshallah.
Inshallah, I mean, in fact, I'm looking forward to 2028, Prof. Nidal. Usama, just to bring you into the discussion, I think Usama is frozen. Oh, there we go. Usama is there. Usama, just listening to what Prof. Nidal has been saying and talking about the culture and talking about the way of life of the resistance in Palestine. And he makes a very, very strong point as well, where everything looks very different from the outside, but the reality itself is obviously paints a completely different picture. And we've also seen a statement made by Khalid al-Kadumi, where he speaks about the term disarmament does not exist in the literature of the resistance in Palestine. And just looking at it from your perspective, how do you see these developments playing out, Osama?
Yeah. Based on my experience as a Palestinian citizen living in the occupied Palestinian territories, the reality is very bleak, really, and the situation is catastrophic because we are not talking about a certain organization or movement that is facing such catastrophic conditions because of the Israeli colonial regime crimes, but we are talking about the entire people, talking about more than 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza alone. I'm not talking now about the West Bank and Jerusalem, about Gaza Strip, who have been subjected to genocidal war for more than 3 years. We are talking about more than 73,000 Palestinian martyrs murdered by the Israeli drones, by the Israeli bombs, by the Israeli guns. We are talking about a people who have been starving for over 3 years because of the Israeli tightened siege on Gaza and because of the dead silence of the international community that comes to Israel from time to time, but it does not take serious suffering and the catastrophe of Palestinian people. The Palestinian people fight for freedom, justice, and independence has not started recently. You know that the Palestinian revolutions started long, long ago against the British colonial power in the 20s, the 30s, and the 40s. And after the Israeli occupation was manufactured and made by the colonial power of Britain and the US, the Palestinian people also resisted and fought for their freedom, and they are still fighting. But when we speak objectively and realistically, the situation in the occupied Palestinian territories is very difficult to bear. In Gaza, there is no feature of life at all, no sign of life. Just yesterday, we saw the Palestinian families bidding farewell to 112 Palestinians recovered, their bodies recovered from under the rubble. And thousands others are still buried under the rubble and they can't be recovered because no equipment and no tool at all. In the occupied West Bank and Jerusalem, you know, the people in the West Bank are living in cantons these days, in small towns and villages separated from one another by the Israeli checkpoints, the Israeli walls, the Israeli colonial outposts and settlements. So really the situation is very difficult, unbearable, and without real help from the free world, the world who love justice and the humanity, I think it's difficult for the Palestinians to continue such lead of life.
Jazakallah for that, Osama. Dr. Ahmed, to bring you into the discussion now. I know the MRN has been following these developments very, very closely, and I've also seen some of the comments coming through via the Media Review Network. But just trying to unpack and understand the position of Hamas in terms of this disarmament roadmap. We know this is conditional, and again, dependent on certain obligations that need to be met. There are strict conditions that Hamas actually has viewed as far as this disarmament proposal and this plan is concerned. Just some of your thoughts.
Yeah, to begin with, I cannot see this so-called disarmament actually happening, primarily because Israel has stated at the onset, I mean, Netanyahu said it this week, that Israel has no intention to withdraw from Gaza. Now, he may be saying this in the context of October 28th, which is the date, I think it's 27 or 28 of Israel's election. The genocide in Gaza has widespread support within the Zionist entity, up to 85%, if not more, support the genocide. So Hamas, this is probably a sort of strategic disarmament by Hamas. They are calling the bluff of the Israelis and the Americans. They've agreed to disarm, but they've said that they want full and unconditional withdrawal by a phased withdrawal by Israel. Israelis doesn't want to withdraw. The military generals have said no. The political establishment has said no. The citizens of Israel have said no, that they will not withdraw because they view this as an integral part of their greater Israel project. So whilst Hamas have said, okay, yes, we are adhering to our part of the Gaza, the comprehensive plan of action, the peace plan. We are agreeing to our part. We have given up governance of Gaza from a political perspective. Now we are agreeing to disarm, but it must be in step or lock key, with Israeli withdrawal. And if Israel doesn't withdraw, then there cannot be any disarmament. So Hamas has put the ball back into the court of the US and Israel and the so-called Board of Peace, which is more of a which wants a sort of colonial peace, if I can put it that way, a peace, a so-called peace where Gazans and Palestinians in Gaza rather continue to live under perpetual occupation and in an open air prison. That's what the Israelis and this Board of Peace want. So Hamas has this is quite a sort of a strategic retreat by Hamas, and I think they will come out of this quite strongly, because they are adhering to the peace. They're showing the world that they're implementing the agreement, and that it's Israel that is hell-bent of continued colonization, continued genocide, and so on. This is not about security. This is about the greater Israel project that they have in mind. Syria is pretty much disarmed. Iraq doesn't pose much of a threat. So it's Gaza and Iran that is the threat to this greater Israel project. So we need to understand this issue from this perspective. And as the professor noted early on, Hamas is not merely a political movement. It is not just a resistance movement. It is an ideology. It will remain an integral part of the moral and fabric of Palestinian society, whether it's in the West Bank were they in Gaza? But yes, they were pushed to this point in a sense that the genocide is unbearable. The people need some sort of retreat or reprieve, rather. And this is a way to provide some sort of temporary reprieve, knowing full well that Israel will not implement their part of the deal. And if Israel does not implement their part of the deal, Hamas will not disarm. And, ultimately, this situation carries on until, freedom comes eventually.
Yes, Prof. Jazakallah for that. Prof. Nidal, I think, Dr. Ahmed spoke about, and I know you always like to talk about strategy and strategic dynamics that are unfolding. And I think this is important to understand in terms of Hamas and the mindset and the thinking of Hamas, where on paper it appears that they are agreeing to the principle of disarmament, but strategically, in terms of putting pressure, even on those that are promoting, and Dr. Ahmed alluded to the board of peace, or also putting pressure on Israel, the United States of America, who are hell-bent on getting this peace deal done and over with in the interest of Israel more than the Palestinians.
Brother, there's a lesson to be learned from the experience of Iran and the US right now. As you can see, Iranians are not wasting their breath trying to take anything the US says or does seriously. And why? It's because they had the US in perspective. They know what the US is. Today, I was reading in the Quran in my daily, dosage, and I came across the verse that says, وَهُوَ الْقَاهِرُ فَوْقَ عِبَادِهِ وَهُوَ الْحَكِيمُ الْخَبِيرُ. I always, in our discussions of different events, I always said that it's worth to see things in clearer terms, in strategic terms, to try to have iBird's view, to rise up and see how things are. This board of peace, it has nothing to do with peace, it has nothing to do with board, was set up by Trump. But if you see the main players in setting this thing up, is actually all of these members of the corridor. The corridor that the coalition of countries, supposedly Muslim Arab countries or government, that went on emergency mode to save so-called Israel from the destruction of October 7. So what do you expect? I mean, these are people that are committed to the extermination of the Palestinian people, the Palestinian cause, and so forth. And they set up this joke called Board of Peace to further actually get rid of the Palestinian cause altogether, and of course, to exterminate the people of Gaza. So that's the only really purpose of this whole Board of Peace thing. And the way it's set up is actually a joke where it's headed by Trump even after presidency and so forth. Playing into their hands, playing in their courtyard or on their terms is a waste of time. Looking at things from the strategic perspective actually makes much more sense. You cannot trust an Arab country that was jailing Palestinians in Gaza for over 20 years, where even the Palestinian prime minister, to cross the border, he had to spend the night on the sidewalk like Ismail Haniyeh did in Rafah crossing, or when his sister had cancer and she couldn't even have exit visa to Egyptian hospitals, and she ended up passing because of cancer. Those people committed to the Zionist cause, to the Israeli cause, they can never be honest brokers or neutral brokers of peace, which we call the intermediaries. Qatar, I'm not blaming Qatar much, but nonetheless, in the bigger scheme of things, basically everybody who is part of that board of peace is actually in collusion of exterminating Palestinians. Brother Nazzal was talking, I am from Gaza. The area where I'm from actually is an area that's long being dominated by so-called the Israeli cancer, beyond the yellow line they're talking about. Gaza, if we remember that it was 2.3 million on October 7, and now they're only talking about 1.7 million. And we just discovered the day before 220 Palestinians martyred that came just by accident, we found out. So the number is actually way much more than what is declared, because they only counted the ones they know of, but there is much more than that. Nonetheless, Hamas does not even have the leverage to even give up its commitment to jihad and to liberation of Palestine. Not even Hamas can even dissolve itself or cancel out that part, because Hamas is not only, like I said, is not only like a hierarchy and organizational structure. There is much more Hamas in terms of believers in Hamas cause, committed to Hamas cause and agenda. There is many more people, whether in Palestine or outside Palestine, that are Hamas today than on October 7th. There are some failures in the way, and I don't blame anybody from Gaza or from Hamas or from resistance ever for anything, because it's easier for us to be like living in comfort and say, oh, they made mistakes here, they made mistakes there. But I do blame everybody who did not subscribe to the goals and agenda and the plan of the resistance. For example, we look at the West Bank, as Brother Nazzal was talking about, and we see the situation right now compared right now to what we have today and what we had October 7 or prior to October 7. We still had thriving resistance in West Bank. And now we see like the resistance completely crushed, eliminated. And now we have the settlers kind of like roaming freely throughout the West Bank. But who was the first to crack down on the resistance? Who actually was the main tool or the main forces that attacked resistance and killed them and allowed the Israelis? It was actually this so-called Palestinian Authority, which is part of the Zionist project as well. So the idea is there are mistakes that were made by any parties. Nonetheless, the realities on the ground today show us actually that all of these attempts to liquidate or to exterminate the Palestinian cause, that they're all, inshallah, failing, because we see the main evil, the great evil, the US itself now, is being actually turning on itself. I mentioned before Trump was elected, I said we're going to have civil war in America, and people were doubting it. And now we see in America that every group or bloc in the US is already divided within itself. The Republican Party is so many fractions, the MAGA so many fractions, the Democrats so many fractions, so forth. So the whole so-called unity that gave that leverage to whatever administration or policy and so forth is already cracking down. We saw, for example, like a couple of weeks ago, we saw one of the most staunch Zionists in the US and in the US decision-making, Senator Graham, who died. And there are lessons to learn from that experience. As evil as that person is, which he does not hide or shy away from being a warmonger and somebody calling for extermination of everybody and so forth. But let's remember that in an interview that he had an hour before he died, he was talking to the biographer, and he said, you know what, I cannot die now. I got so much to do. Remember that word. Okay, what's the lesson to be learned from this? That's somebody as evil as he was. His life, until the last breath he took, was fully dedicated to the cause he believed in, the evil cause he believed in. And he died serving that cause. How many of us today, aside from the resistance, meet those standards? Not too many, right? And that interesting part is that, like what he said was this. Keep in mind, he was working on Gaza, liquidating Gaza, and he was working on normalizing Saudi Arabia and Israel, and he was doing the Ukraine, all in the same breath, right? And he said, I cannot die now. He's challenging Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that on when the end of his life is gonna come. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made a sign to all of us around the world to show us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who decides whatever happens. So that's a big lesson for us. Doesn't matter board of peace, doesn't matter Trump in office, doesn't matter Saudis, Emiratis conspiring against Palestine, so forth. Doesn't matter all of that, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, once he decides that it is time, it will happen. And I trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that in everything that we see today, as bleak as it is, that there is always all wisdom for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to purify the ranks and to make people believe that, for whatever that Allah has declared in this life and in the hereafter is the right thing.
Well, certainly, Prof, and just so much positives that one can actually take from away from what you said. But Sheikh Osama, just to come back to you as well, and just to understand, some of the thinking behind the pressure by the mediators on the resistance, and also to trying to understand what are some of the fears and some of the dangers that lie with the agreement from a Palestinian perspective.
Now, concerning why the pressure is placed always on the Palestinian side, this is not a surprise, really, because we know that Israel has all the support from the Western countries and a lot of other countries on this planet. So it was not surprising to the Palestinians. And you know that the international community that is sponsoring this process today is the same international community that kept silent on the Israeli genociding of the Palestinian people over the past 3 years. And it's the same international community that keeps silent on the Israeli continuation of occupation and colonialization of the Palestinian territory. All the world is watching the Israeli settlers, gangsters, now attacking the Palestinian families, the Palestinian farming communities, killing people, injuring people, setting fire to farms and houses, uprooting olive trees, stealing the cattle of the Palestinians, or even killing the cattle in order to impoverish the Palestinian people. And it does nothing beyond condemnation and denunciation. So that is the all the new position of the world supporting Israel. I mean the governments of the world, of course, not the peoples, at the expense of the right of the Palestinian people. Now, concerning the fears of the Palestinians with regard to the agreement, really, when they declared years ago that there is a breakthrough and they are going to open Gaza for humanitarian aid and launch the reconstruction process and the entrance of the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, all the Palestinians were sure that Israel is going to thwart this effort, and this what happened. And when the representative of the POP, the Board of Peace, Mladinov, met with the Israeli occupation Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he got convinced of Netanyahu's position, and he backed down on his first position. And Netanyahu succeeded, I think, in thwarting this regional and international effort to stop the genocide and to start a new chapter in the life of the Gaza Strip. Today, all the statements and the news outlets focused on the failure of this initiative as Israel rejected its terms and its clauses, really.
Yes, Sheikh Osama. Also, Dr. Ahmed, what we've also learned over a period of time is, whether we're talking about the mediators, whether we're talking about the Board of Peace, I mean, they've never, ever been serious about the agreement. And this has been the case from the outset, from previous agreements. And there's some bitter lessons to be learned. And also, Professor Nidal alluded to parallels being drawn between Iran and the agreements that have been made with Iran over a period of time, or the so-called agreements. And we've seen so much coming through from someone like Donald Trump on Truth Social. And we've seen, Iran debunking a lot that he had posted. And once again, I think with regard to Hamas as well, I'm sure that they are going to be wary of this, because there's so much has taken place in the last few months in terms of the lessons that we can learn with so-called agreements that have been made with Iran.
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on. Hamas is not naive. It is a resistance movement. It understands the colonial logic of this Board of Peace. It understands the colonial logic of its oppressor and occupation. So Hamas is not naive. It knows that, Osama referred to, the board of peace and Miladinov, when he stated initially that withdrawal must move in lockstep with decommissioning. His words, a post on X on July 31st. After meeting Netanyahu, he said, contrary to inaccurate reports, we note that the withdrawal of the IDF beyond the yellow line will take place once decommissioning is complete, as Hamas committed to the mediators. So those are the board of peace direct words. So Hamas understands this and understands that this is happening under duress, and understand full well that this is a colonial peace, a sort of colonial peace. You know, it's an oxymoron, but meant to provide the narrative that this is not a lasting peace and resistance will continue. So Hamas is on the back foot right now to some extent. Its main ally in the region, Iran, is fighting a war on its own. And, Iran understands the way the Israel and the United States work, which is why it wants any international guarantees to any deal. It wants a deal to be ratified by the United Nations Security Council, by the US Congress as well. So Iran is taking a lot of lessons. Iran itself is not naive. And it is extremely powerful. It is not, Iraq. It is not a small territory such as Gaza. It has been waiting 47 years for this day, since February 28th, for its chance to resist the colonial project. And we know Iran is a very important piece of the puzzle of Greater Israel. You defeat Iran, the Greater Israel project it becomes a step closer to reality. So if Iran falls, Greater Israel becomes a reality very quickly. So Iran has learned this. Whilst it's fighting its own battles at the moment, it has not forgotten about Hamas, which is why Hamas said, Khalil al-Hayya said that disarmament is not in the vocabulary of the resistance. It will not be it will never be in the vocabulary of the resistance. What we're seeing right now is a sort of strategic retreat, knowing full well that Israel will renegade, that elections are coming up in Israel. I mentioned this earlier. Israel wants, Netanyahu wants to be re-elected. Everybody wants to be re-elected. They differ on a lot of things in Israel. But when it comes to genocide, they are in step with each other. When it comes to not withdrawing from Gaza, they are in step with each other. When it comes to further colonization of the West Bank, the various colonies in the West Bank, they are in step with each other. When it comes to not withdrawing from Lebanon, they agree with each other. So they may have personality differences and clashes with Netanyahu, but they agree on not withdrawing, which is why because they want to realize the Greater Israel project in support with the Israeli people. So what our listeners may want to take from this is that this is a strategic retreat to some extent, knowing full well that Israel will renegade and not even implement their part of the agreement, and resistance will always be there in one way, shape, or form.
Yes, Dr. Ahmed. And also, I think, Professor Nidal, what we're also trying to wrap our minds and to understand is not only looking at it from a resistance perspective, but looking at Hamas from a political perspective and a leadership perspective, because what's important is we've seen, from Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, Dr. Abdulaziz Rantisi, Ismail Haniya, Yahya Sinwar, and now the leader Khalil al-Hayya as well, just to look at it from a leadership perspective and strategically, how the Hamas leadership is actually placed both from a resistance and a political perspective to deal with the position that the resistance finds itself in.
Yes, brother. In a nutshell, and before we go into details, in a nutshell, Hamas, inshallah, will outlast the US as we know it. will outlast Israel and would outlast the Trump administration in the same exact order. So that goes without saying. In a few years' time, much of what I said is not going to be around. Hamas, inshallah, is going to be thriving into a new phase, a new version of itself. To understand Hamas in terms of organizational structure and so forth, Hamas has evolved over the years. It started actually from Gaza, in particular, Islamic University in Gaza back in 1987 and so forth, and learned so much experiences, and many of them have been martyred and so forth. And every time leadership was martyred, everybody said, oh, Hamas is finished and Hamas is over, only to find out that Hamas surprises everybody by evolving into much more advanced, sophisticated form, whether on terms of its political bureau or political organization and leadership, whether it's on its social agenda, which is a good part of Hamas, by the way. Hamas is a grassroots social movement before anything anyway, before anything else. And then in terms of, alhamdulillah, in terms of military capability, I trust that Hamas is evolving as we speak right now. The leadership that we hear of, the names, I don't want to go over those names, which many of them actually I get to know personally over the years. Those are the people of the time, as we say, like for the phase that we're dealing with right now. But there's a new Hamas that's emerging right now on every level. And it's much more advanced, it's much more sophisticated, it's much more hardened, life hardened, battle hardened, and so forth. And inshallah, in time, not in a very long time, we will see a version of Hamas that will shock the entire world. A very contemporary, very sophisticated, very competent, and much more influential in affairs. And I'm not going to say on what level. But Hamas is alhamdulillah ba'alameen, in the watchful eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would reward Hamas for all the sacrifices, would reward the Palestinians, the Palestinian people. And when I say Palestinian people, yes, of course, the people of Gaza, the people of West Bank, the people of historical Palestine come always at the front. But everybody who believes in the Palestinian cause, everybody who took down to the streets chanting for Palestine, whether it's in the World Cup games or the streets or paying the prices of being jailed, and many of them actually, probably most of them are not even Arabs and Muslims. These are all Palestinians. These all have Palestinian blood. So when we say today we are all Palestinians, it goes far beyond the 11 or 15 million Palestinians in Palestine and in diaspora. Palestine today is basically runs in the blood of most of the world people. The resistance of the Palestinians, call it Hamas, call it any name you want to call it, is basically becoming an identity becoming a culture. And we see right now resistance taking all different shapes and forms on every level. I don't want to go into details, but every monumental change that you see anywhere in the world, you can, alhamdulillah, give Hamas credit for being part of it, for inspiring this human dignity and pride, and the call for justice for the entire humanity. I always said, even after October 7, I said October 7 was not just a Palestinian event, it's an event to liberate the entire world, to liberate humanity from the evil that the US, the Zionist project, represent. And that's what we see today. And that's what we will continue to see in years to come. And I trust, inshallah, in our lifetime or the lifetime of many of us, that we will get to see a different world, more human world, more just world, a world that offers hope for people to dream of a future of dignity and justice. And alhamdulillah, the blood of Palestine, whether it be in Gaza and West Bank and other places, would always bear fruit, inshallah.
Yes, inshallah, Prof. Nidal. Sheikh Osama, I just want to shift a bit of focus on Palestinian unity, because, and the reason why I'm raising this issue is we've heard now the latest about the United States of America, the European Union, and also the Palestinian Authority under Mahmoud Abbas talking about legislative elections that are coming up in Palestine, but also at the same time shaping new rules to actually exclude Palestinians who support the resistance. And I just like your thoughts, from in terms of how this would possibly be playing out, because we know Mahmoud Abbas is now serving 22 years in office, and we've seen it in the past as well, that if he sees he's going to lose out, he will cancel elections and the like as well. And where does this leave Palestine, from a governance perspective, and also in terms of a unified resistance, should elections like these actually take place, and should, these rules be implemented to exclude Palestinians who support the resistance?
Yeah, I understand how difficult the situation is when we talk about people under occupation. Occupation is not like any other occupation or any other colonial power, because when the colonial power of Britain, for example, took over many countries around the world, its settlers were convinced that they have a homeland to return to called the UK. When the United States occupied Iraq, the American soldiers were aware of their homeland that they would one day return to, which is the United States. But the problem here is that the Israeli settlers, the Israeli colonists, have no other place to return to. This is what they are convinced of. So the Palestinian situation is very complicated. And in light of this complicated situation, how the people can practice their normal life and have elections and all that. I understand that as a Palestinian, but at the same time, the national unity is a priority for every Palestinian citizen, for every Palestinian man and Palestinian woman. Because without this national unity and without this complete Palestinian fabric, I think the situation would be more difficult, more complicated, and the struggle for freedom and independence won't be as it should be. So I see that if the elections enable the people of Palestine to choose their representatives and their leadership and put an end to this national split, then why not? If these elections allow every Palestinian to express their opinion by voting and bring all the people and all the sectors and all the institutions once again together, just like before 2006. And we all experienced the first intifada and how the unity of the Palestinian people enabled them to achieve the impossible, really, and to show the world the real image of Palestine and of the people of Palestine. And at the same time, during the second intifada, Al-Aqsa Intifada, how the Palestinian people were united together, one voice, one hand. So if these elections would get the Palestinian people back to their unity, then I think it would be an opportunity for Palestine to have these elections. Despite all the bleak situation, despite all the complications, all the apocalyptic suffering that the Palestinians have. But if this is the way towards unity, then let it be.
Yes, and also, Dr. Ahmed, we know that from past experience as well, in terms of past outcomes as far as elections is concerned, there is no way that recognition is going to be given to a pro-Hamas or a pro-resistance victory, even when it comes to elections.
Yeah, these elections, I mean, for whatever it is worth, someone talks about unity and so on, and it's paramount. Unity is paramount amongst the people. But whether you can have unity with a Bantustan establishment is unlikely. We've seen it before, we've seen it again. Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen's very existence is premised on adherence to the settler colony. It's premised on adherence to his colonial masters. Everything he does is to please Israel and the United States, not the Palestinian people. So unity is important, but can we have unity with a figure such as Abu Mazen and the Fatah establishment that he represents? Unlikely. I know we talk about unity all the time, and it's paramount. But who is going to, you're going to hand select your opponents? It's like in Egypt. I mean, Sisi wins 95% of the vote because he jails and he kills all Muslim Brotherhood members. If Muslim Brotherhood were involved in free and fair elections, Egypt won't have Sisi as a dictator. In the same way, if we have free and fair elections, Abu Mazen will lose tomorrow. I mean, the very existence of Fatah is about recognizing the Zionist entity. It's about recognizing the occupation. It is about recognizing the colonization of historic Palestine. And that is untenable for the majority of the Palestinian people, I would think. And it's also untenable for the Ummah. No part of historical Palestine must be in the hands of the Zionists, not an inch. So these elections that are coming part, and it's easy for me as an outsider to say so, but these elections that are coming up, it's in my opinion, it's just a form of colonial elections to recognize Fatah. To the international community, by the way, is very desperate to get rid of the Palestinian problem, and they'll recognize this board of peace. They recognize Fatah. Even South Africa has recognized the Bantustan ambassador, Hanan Jarar. I mean, she does nothing but simply just, recognize nothing really constructive. So what do we hope to gain from these elections? Nothing. Where they add any value? Nothing. So, it will only perpetuate the suffering of Palestinian people. And, we're going to see historic lows, in my opinion, in terms of turnout.
Yes, I see we've got about 6 minutes to go before we end, and I'd just like to go on and get final thoughts, starting with you, Prof. Nidal, and then we'll go to Osama and yourself, Dr. Ahmed. Prof. Nidal? If you could unmute your mic, please, Prof.
When we look at the scene, we see that there are the events and the events makers and creators, and there's the noise. Anything that has to do with America and its orbit. So you talk about the US, you're talking about all of these Arab countries, you're talking about anybody who's subservient to the US. These are all noise. So I really don't waste time when I read headlines about what Trump, board of peace, mediators, this whole thing. Even elections, by the way, all the elections were done under the auspices of the Americans, and we know not a single election was honored. Not only in Palestine, by the way, everywhere. So why would we keep believing in the same game that has proven to be nothing but falsehood, right? All I see that Allah's promise is being fulfilled, and we will come to see it in the most starkest terms, not only in Palestine, in the US, and throughout the world. And just like I said, October 7 is the event that will change the face of history as we know it. And inshallah, free Palestine from the river to the sea is a reality we're all about to witness and live, inshallah.
Inshallah, Ameen. Jazakallah for that, Sheikh Osama. Final thoughts?
The Palestinian people have been fighting for their freedom for 77, 78 years, and they have not lost the stamina and the audacity, and they will continue their struggle because their dignity and their freedom is uncompromised, and justice can't be divided. At the same time, they are not isolated from the rest of the world. They are part and parcel of this world, and the word support for them in this struggle is very important, and this is evidenced by the current public opinion position of the Palestinian cause around the world. And of course, the people of Palestine are not, let me say, stubborn people. They are open for the world politics and for reaching and achieving peace for Palestine and for the whole region without compromising their dignity and their right to self-determination and to having their land free of the yoke of the occupation.
Jazakallah for that, Dr. Ahmed. I'll let you have the final word.
Yeah, Hamas will subsist in some way or another. I mean, one must not lose hope. Since October 7th, with the amount of pro-Palestinian political leaders in the US that have been elected. I mean, just a few hours ago, we had Abdullah Sayyid in Michigan. You had Zohran Mamdani, rather. You had other progressive Palestinians, Milad Kairos in Colorado, and so on and so forth. The list goes on. So October 7th was that catalyst for the world to catapult the Palestinian struggle once again to the forefront of our collective consciousness. And despite efforts by this board of peace or this board of colonial peace, whatever they want to call themselves, the Palestinians will resist in one way or another, with or without Hamas. But inshallah, Hamas continues to be at the forefront. The challenges notwithstanding, the internal challenges notwithstanding, the unity challenges included in that. So it's important that we do not lose hope. The resistance is fighting amongst the first and fourth largest armies in the world, and collectively they're fighting against all armies in the world. So Hamas will resist. They're still there as a political movement. They are still there as a resistance movement. Israel is not going to adhere to its part of the deal. So talking about disarmament, it should be a mute topic. But so rather we can look forward to somehow Palestinians getting some sort of reprieve in the short run in Gaza, in the short term rather in Gaza, whilst Hamas regroups and comes back stronger, inshallah.
Well, inshallah, Jazakallah khairan so much for that to you, Prof. Nidal Sakr, Sheikh Osama, Nazzal, and also Dr. Ahmed, Haroon, Jazbhay. We do appreciate your time with us right here on Salam Media, as always, inshallah. And looking forward to future engagement, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
That brings us to the end of part one of tonight's discussion right here on Salam Media. We still have got another hour to come, and I promise you that's going to be quite interesting as well, against the background of what is taking place in South Africa. Now, we've seen a communication come out where over 60 organizations in South Africa have united to challenge xenophobia in South Africa, and this document actually details how this is going to be achieved, but also looking at some of the other critical issues that are playing out in the country. So stay with us. We still have got another hour with in conversation with myself, Inayat Wadi.